It'll once again be Bryce Young starting on Sunday against the Saints. Will we see the same on offense, or will they decide to open it up? We'll break it all down right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Wednesdays throughout the entirety of the regular season, I'm right here answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter to get those questions in for next week. And I understand, didn't do the mailbag this week. I did answer all of your questions, though, via DMs on Twitter. So if you ask me a question, it's not on the show, I'll still get back to you at some point in time. And then next Wednesday, it's going to be the trade deadline. Not sure when the Panthers fly out to Munich and when they're going to decide this is when we have to make a trade, but it's possible we're talking about a trade next week. So that may also, once again, nix the mailbag, but still bring in the questions at Julian Council on Twitter, in my DMs, and just adding me. So also, today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. It is Friday. The Panthers are facing off against the Saints on Sunday in a NFC South pillow fight, or I think we called it a thumb war yesterday on the crossover episode with Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, 2-6 Saints, who got off to a great start, blowing out the Panthers, blowing out the Cowboys, have lost 6 straight games and have faced a ton of injuries. And the Panthers know all about injuries, as they have a bunch of guys out for the rest of the season who have also missed a ton of time as well. And they sit at 1-7 and hoping to get their first win in the division and their first win of Bryce Young as their starting quarterback, as Bryce is set to get the start for the second straight week in a row as Andy Dalton continues to recover from a right thumb sprain. It's Friday, meaning it's time for the keys to victory heading into this matchup week 9 at home against New Orleans. And let's start off with Bryce Young. Let's start off with the offense. Last week, I asked Dave Canales to get Bryce Young comfortable early, show some confidence in him, build some confidence. We saw it on the opening drive, that game script. They went 49 yards for a touchdown. And then after that, looked a lot like what we saw week 1 and week 2 as far as not throwing the ball down the field. Didn't see it until the third quarter when they were already down 21-7. Then all of a sudden, when it's garbage time, we start seeing some throws down the field, start seeing some connections to Xavier Leggett and to Jalen Coker. And I'm wondering, where was this the entire game? And let's go back to Monday after reviewing the game film. Dave Canales had this to say about what stood out to him when watching film on Bryce Young. He said his ability to get back out there and just continue to compete. He found some great completions throughout the game, the chemistry, finding Xavier, finding Jalen a couple times. There were some things that I was really encouraged by. He took steps in that regard. I think that the whole process, the pre-snap operations, the focus and intent for us, improvement-wise. And they had all week long to get that together as Bryce took all the first team snaps. You have to wonder, not really wonder, but you shouldn't really be that surprised that when someone doesn't get all the reps of the first team, that they're going to come back and the operation is going to be rusty, which is why it made sense for Bryce to continue to be the guy if you want to continue to develop. And speaking of development, last I heard of Carolina Blitz asked Dave Canales earlier this week about working on Bryce's technique and the development. And he talked about how he thought he played fast in that game. I thought that he was very decisive. He had some scrambles. He threw the ball away in some situations when it was the right thing to do. He found a little bit of extra time in the pocket to get some of those late completions. That was encouraging to see him play with that type of speed and urgency that showed up on game day. That was great. We didn't see that speed. We didn't see that urgency. We didn't see that decisiveness week 1 when they played against the Saints on the road. We didn't see it in week 2 when Bryce just looked like a shell of a quarterback against the Chargers. And that's part of why I have lobbied to continue to see Bryce Young play, even though I feel like at the end of the day, this is likely going to lead to Bryce Young no longer being the quarterback in Carolina, but he's getting a second chance. He's getting a third chance in this way because Dalton is not able to play, or at least Dave Canales said that he was not ready to go. And we'll talk about whether that carries into next week, who might get to start against the Giants in Munich in a few minutes here on the show. But looking at this, you have an opportunity to develop the quarterback. You have some film of what he looked like after sitting down for 5 weeks. And yes, he did get some spot opportunities against Chicago, and he got some spot opportunity also against Washington. But now you've really gotten to see what he looks like after that time on the bench. Can you build on that? And can you actually open up the offense this week and keep a defense honest? Bryce was 10 of 10 on passing behind the line of scrimmage. That's awesome. Every quarterback in the NFL should be able to do that. He was 7 of 9 within 10 yards. So passes behind the line of scrimmage and going within 10 yards, 17 of 19. Good accuracy, like all of that. But after that, between 10 and 20 yards, 5 of 12. Not great. Has to improve on that. But down the field, only 3 passes last week went down the field. And that was certainly discouraging. We didn't see the first one until they were down 21-7 when Bryce overthrew to the left side Xavier Leggett, and every single one of his deep throws, 20-plus yards, were to the left side. He actually completed 2 out of 3. And for 52 yards, you'll take that. So you saw his ability to complete passes behind the line of scrimmage within 10 yards, had some issues from intermediate. But when it comes to deep balls, only 1 real overthrow. And outside of that, he was on target. Didn't get a ton of opportunities, but you got to stretch the field, got to give the offense a chance to be able to run the ball, because Chuba Hubbard, 56 yards on 15 carries. You got to be able to keep the Saints honest. You got to find a way to stretch the field, at least show them that you're willing to do it. Otherwise, well, you get what we got for the most part against Denver on Sunday, where it was predictable. It was a bunch of quick passes, a bunch of screens, and an offense that showed no explosion until it was garbage time and when they finally allowed Bryce to throw that ball down the field. So let him throw down the field, show some confidence in him. I know Canales doesn't have a ton based off of what we've seen as far as his play calls of Bryce and the play calls of Andy. A ton of different experience there as far as Andy Dalton being in the league for over a decade. Bryce Young only in his second year. Totally get all of that, but still, man, you got to at least try, because what do you have to lose? The game, the season's already over. Number 2, they got to cut down on mistakes on offense, and that's more so penalties. 4 holding calls last week. 2 of them were on Ike Ekwonu, who may not play this week. We'll talk about the injury report here at the end of the show, as he's dealing with an ankle injury suffered in that game where he did leave but then came back. That is something that has lingered throughout the rest of the week so far. So we'll see whether he'll be able to play. Dave Canales will speak later today on Friday and give an update as far as game status is. And I would expect Ike's going to likely be up there as far as maybe questionable, doubtful. We'll see. But 4 holding calls, 2 on Ike. Not great. Jalen Coker had 1. Brady Christensen had another, and that was on the opening drive, by the way, and the Panthers were able to overcome that. So good to see offensively able to overcome some penalties like that have really hurt them at different spots throughout this season. I think back to the Atlanta game, holding calls really killed them on one of those drives. So they got a takeaway and could have gone up by 7 instead of 3 points against the Falcons that Sunday afternoon. Got a false start. Can't have those. 2 delay game penalties, both on Bryce Young. Canales came out on Monday and talked about those where, yes, he did not get the play call in as quickly as he would like, but still felt that his quarterback could have been able to get the call out, set the protection, get the ball snapped in plenty of time. And that did not happen on 2 plays on the same drive. Eventually, though, he hit Jalen Coker on a deep ball for a really good throw there on that 3rd down. And there was also a roughing the passer to boot, which helped the Panthers move the ball down the field before Bryce later on threw an interception targeting Tommy Trimble later on that drive. And there was 1 ineligible man downfield penalty that really didn't matter. That was also another interception Bryce Young threw, thrown to the left side to Jalen Coker. So got to cut down on the penalties. Also got to cut down on the interceptions. It looked like with the one to Trimble that Bryce thought Trimble was going to go to the outside. He actually went to the inside, and miscommunication. I think a lot of that goes with those 2 guys not playing a lot of football together recently. Also, someone's at fault. It's either the quarterback, it's either the receiver. Typically in those situations, the receiver runs the wrong route, but I think it's just kind of the chemistry lack of that was an issue in that situation. And in the other one, just not enough air on the ball to Jalen Coker, and a good play by the Broncos corner to get that interception. So they got to cut down on the mistakes on offense. And number 3, get more takeaways on defense. I was encouraged. Like, defensively, they actually were better against the run. They held the Broncos to about 3.1 yards per attempt rushing. Denver still ran for over 100 yards. Like, that's going to happen against Carolina, but they really made them work for it. It wasn't like they broke out any long runs at all in that game. So that was encouraging to see from the Panthers defense, where Josie Jewell made his return. I think that was a big impact. Ashawn Robinson, Shai Tuttle, back-to-back weeks looking at PFF. He's been one of the highest graded defenders for Carolina. And that is an encouraging sign to have those 2 guys playing good football and then possibly getting Jaden Crumedy, the 6th-round pick out of Mississippi State, back this week, making maybe his debut in the NFL. So the 2 takeaways, both of them punches, that was something that we go all the way back to the spring. And Dave Canales talked about he wanted to see these guys punching at the ball. Jero Avero also talked about punching at the ball, getting the ball on the ground, as the Panthers were last in the NFL in takeaways last season, doing a much better job. That's the 2nd time this season they've been able to get 2 takeaways. The last time they did it was week 2 at home against the Chargers. If they're able to get some turnovers this week, going to have a chance to win. Right now this season, Panthers are -6 turnover differential. The Saints are +2. So New Orleans doesn't turn the ball over nearly as much as Carolina. And here's the thing. The Panthers cannot turn the ball over and win a football game. They literally have not done that so far this season. The only game they have won is the only game where they did not have turnover, and their opponent did week 3 against the Raiders. They want to win on Sunday. They cannot turn the football over, and they got to find a way to force mistakes with the Saints offense that is banged up as quarterback and Derek Carr. Yes, who's coming back, but coming back from that oblique. You have to wonder, how healthy is he? I don't think the Saints season is salvageable at this point in time. Ross Jackson certainly didn't believe so when we talked to him yesterday, but they're going to try. And by trying, they're bringing back a quarterback who may not be 100%. So got to find a way to force some turnovers, punch at the ball, get that ball on the ground, and then complimentary football. We saw it last week for 3 drives. After that, didn't see it the rest of the game, but we know it's possible here. They can force turnovers. They can pass it in for a touchdown. They can come back and get a stop, get the ball back on offense. We have seen that happen in Carolina here in 2024. So the hope is that can happen again on Sunday. So more takeaways, got to cut down on mistakes on offense. That's not just turnovers. That's also penalties. And then open it up, Dave. What do you have to lose? Open it up. Let's see what Bryce Young can do and try to build that game plan around him and his strengths. So that's the hope as far as keys to victory heading into this contest on Sunday against the Saints. Got a couple of questions, too, in particular, heading into week 9 and thinking down the road about who's going to start next week in Munich. Will it be Bryce? Will it be Andy? Really curious that Andy Dalton is a full participant, but is not starting on Sunday. And then what are the expectations for Xavier Leggett and Jalen Coker now that Deontay Johnson is no longer here in Carolina? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. Football season is back, and the best way to get to games this fall is with Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to say more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created the Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made just for you, super fans, the fans who are first in the parking lot and who are last to leave. We see you. You know what else has got me a bit of Panthers fan fuel this week? Getting to see Jalen Coker. Where are the Coke heads at out there? I absolutely love that ridiculous nickname of the Jalen Coker fan base. And Fast I Hurt did the Lord's work, asked about that on Wednesday. He just laughed. So God bless her. God bless Jalen Coker. And God bless all of you Coke heads out there. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. It will once again be Bryce Young starting on Sunday in place of Andy Dalton as he continues to recover from a right thumb sprain suffered in a car accident last Tuesday afternoon when he was picking up his kids from school. And thank God again that Andy, his wife, his kids, and of course their dog were all okay. And the worst thing to come out of that was a right thumb sprain that kept Andy out of the game last week and is also keeping him out of the game this week, but not really, as he's set to be the backup to Bryce Young on Sunday, which brings up a lot of questions moving forward about who's going to start at quarterback next week and beyond for the Panthers as Bryce gets the second straight week to start in his second chance, possibly his third chance. If you are a believer like me that when Andy's ready to go, he'll be the starter, but it sounds like Andy kind of is ready to go. But Dave Canales said on Wednesday that he was going to err on the side of caution and he wanted to get Andy in the best possible situation to be able to make a decision going forward about who indeed would be the Panthers starting quarterback. Then when asked about the situation on Thursday, Andy Dalton said that he just told Dave Canales how he's feeling, that he knew Canales was ultimately the guy who was going to make the decision, that he didn't want him to hear from someone else, but he wanted to tell him how he was doing. And he said, quote, I let him know my thoughts and how I felt and then made his decision. And I mean, that's his job. I felt like coming into it, I felt like I could go, but for him, he wanted to give me another week of rest, which it definitely won't be a bad thing. And who knows, players all the time want to come out there, want to play, even if not 100%. And it's likely, maybe possible, I don't know which one it is, but it certainly is possible and possibly likely as well that he's not 100%. And that Dave Canales is making the right decision for the player and making the right decision for the team by giving it another week for Andy Dalton. When Andy's out there as a full participant all throughout the week, it kind of makes you go, is Andy Dalton able to play, or is this just Canales wanting to give Bryce Young one more look after getting him out last week, looking at the film, being able to coach him throughout this week and develop and then see what he does on Sunday? If he can see that development, does he move on with Bryce the rest of the year? Or does he decide that actually Andy Dalton gives this team the best chance to win, even if they sit at 1-8 or 2-7? We will see. And I have been pretty firm believer that once Andy Dalton's healthy, that he would be the starting quarterback for the Panthers, just based off of how we've seen games be called for Andy and how we've seen games be called for Bryce. And also going back to every single week since Andy Dalton took over the starting job, him being asked, Dave Canales, about the situation with Bryce Young and with Andy Dalton, and always going back to how Andy Dalton was the best guy for the team and to help them win games, and how Andy had done some good things. And even when asked about Bryce individually, he always brought it back to Andy Dalton. So just based off all of that, what I've seen, what I've heard, felt like to me that whenever Andy's ready to go, he would be the guy. Andy said he was ready to go this week. Dave said no. Sit down, get healthier, and then we'll reevaluate next week and moving forward. So it's very possible, again, that Dalton actually still is injured and that he just want to get out there and play to help his team. And Dave Canales is just saying, relax. Or Dalton actually is ready to go. And Dave's saying, you know what? Let's give Bryce one more shot and see how this works out. And if Bryce plays well, I'll stick with him. I don't really know what's going to happen here, y'all. If Bryce goes out there, lights it up, throws for 300 yards, then I don't really see how they go back to Andy Dalton next week in Munich. And is this just going to be a week-to-week proposition? Because at some point in time, Dave Canales has just got to come out and firmly say, this is our quarterback. He never really made it firm with Andy. He just said, Andy will start this week. And felt like from the beginning, they're going to take it week to week. I guess maybe that's to allow Bryce Young some time. But really, when you saw how Bryce played and how things looked with Andy those first two games, didn't feel like they were going to go back to Bryce Young. And when he was asked about the team's reaction last week with Bryce being the starter, didn't really sound like the team was that excited. And we saw the energy level from them against the Raiders. We saw just how everything went operationally with Andy compared to how things had gone with Bryce week 1 and week 2. And even this past week in Denver, I feel like the team believes in Andy Dalton more than they believe in Bryce Young. And certainly the coach has shown that he believes in Andy Dalton more than he believes in Bryce Young. But looking at things down the road, the Panthers got to find a quarterback. And they're better served for the final 9 games of this season playing Bryce Young, holding out the hope that Canales can do his job and develop him and get Bryce Young to the point where they can actually go back to him next season. At the very least, they're going to have to bring in competition, because you cannot sit here and just feel like he's turned a corner unless he has one of those like Jordan Love type of second halves that we saw last year with the Packers. And I don't think that that's going to happen. I don't think Bryce Young right now is capable of that. And I do question whether he'll ever be capable of turning around like Jordan Love did last year, where at this time in Green Bay, there was a lot of questions whether that was going to be the guy long-term for them. Panthers have a quarterback they put a lot of investment in, brought a new coaching staff to help develop, brought in new players. One of them, of course, Deontay Johnson is no longer here. Would make the most sense, again, to just rock with Bryce. But if Bryce goes out there, it's completely terrible. at some point in time, you got to make a decision. But this is not the situations that we've talked about in the past. It's not the Jets a couple years ago where they're sitting there in playoff contention and Zach Wilson is why they're going to lose games. This isn't the Colts right now where Anthony Richardson is tapping out of games, but also looking just god-awful completion percentage-wise. And the Colts have a team that could go to the playoffs, and they were right there last year. You got to do the right thing for the team and not just sacrifice that for the development of the young player, even though if you put in those investments like Carolina did, you kind of got to sacrifice the team at some point in time for the guy to develop and improve that you made the right decision. Or maybe you say, nope, we're out. And Indianapolis, don't know what they're going to do with Anthony Richardson. Carolina, we don't really know what they're going to do with Bryce Young, even past this week, whether he continues to start or not. So it's not a situation like that where the Panthers are contending for anything. You're not contending. So at this point in time, why play the 37-year-old quarterback who's not under contract next year over the second-year quarterback who you spent all that to get? Why not continue to play him and develop him? So we'll see who starts moving forward, but it'll be interesting. It's going to really be based off of how Bryce plays this Sunday. If he does not play well, then, well, that might mean Andy Dalton the rest of the way, at least next weekend in Munich, and maybe they'll reevaluate it past the bye. But after this week, with Bryce healthy, assuming he's healthy, with Andy Dalton healthy, assuming he's healthy, Canales has got to make a decision and stick with it, and that's who needs to start the final 8 games of the season, and really probably should be Bryce Young. And then the other thing looking at heading this game, what are the expectations for Xavier Leggett and Jalen Coker moving forward? Looking at the stats, Xavier Leggett is the Panthers' leading receiver among wide receivers. The leading receiver actually is Chuba Hubbard, now that Deontay Johnson is no longer here. And raise your hand if you thought Chuba Hubbard through 8 weeks would be the Panthers' leading receiver. Anyone? I don't think anyone would expect that at all. And it says a lot about how Chuba has developed as a pass catcher out of the backfield, that now he is leading the Panthers in receptions. It also says a lot about what the Panthers wide receiver room is, that he is leading the Panthers in receptions. But there are more positives when you look at the wide receiver room, given the fact that Chuba Hubbard's leading receiver, because Xavier Leggett, 22 receptions so far this season, 211 yards, 3 touchdowns. He has had some pretty positive moments. Has had some issues with drops as well, but still a young guy developing who's showing those signs. And we didn't see those signs last year with Jonathan Mingo. And we have not seen him this year either when he started off as the Panthers' number 3 wide receiver. We're getting it with Xavier Leggett. The only thing missing so far is the deep ball and getting him out in space and just running past defenders. We have not been able to see that yet, and hopefully we can see Dave Canales scheme something up like that and in the coming weeks for Xavier Leggett to really get the juices flowing moving forward. And then shout out to my Cokeheads out there, Jalen Coker, 12 receptions so far this season, 186 yards and a touchdown, first career touchdown coming last week in that win, or the loss, against Denver. He has an 80% receiving success rate so far this year, which he does not qualify among NFL receivers, but that would be number 1 in the league if he was able to qualify. And eventually I think he will. And he has a 12.4 receiving yards per target, which blows everyone else out of the water. Adam Thielen has a 9.1, but Adam Thielen has missed the past 5 weeks of the season. So that is insane, just how well Jalen Coker has played. PFF numbers have him as one of the Panthers' top players over the last couple of weeks on offense, and he has been good. And he is, I'm not going to say been a revelation, but you feel really good about where things stand. Because there's a point in time, like sitting there at training camp, this guy was not making plays at all. He's a rookie, totally understand it, but was not making plays. And the hype around him, once Panthers signed him as a UDFA at a Holy Cross, that he could be one of those guys to make the roster, it didn't feel like it was going to actually come to fruition. And it felt to the point, like I was having conversations with people where like Coker's not going to make the team, but he made some plays there at the end against Buffalo in that preseason finale. And the Panthers look at their situation at wide receiver, and Canales just came out and said they were the deepest on the position. I mean, I didn't think that was a very deep position group, but he felt like they were. And Coker made the team. They cut him, made a calculated risk by doing it. We're able to get him. And now he's back here and he's making some plays as Mingo has not played well. Deontay Johnson's gone. Thielen's been injured. And you got 2 guys in Leggett and Coker who you're hoping to build with moving forward. You can even throw JT Sanders in there as well as a pass-catching tight end, where there's 3 guys who hopefully can be foundational pieces in the receiving game moving forward. And you got to start somewhere. And if the Panthers starting a first-round pick in Xavier Leggett and a UDFA diamond in the rough and Jalen Coker and a 4th-round pick and JT Sanders, Like that, there's worse places you can start as far as trying to rebuild this offense, try to figure out who are going to be your weapons for whoever ends up being the quarterback here long term. So that's a couple of questions I have heading into this week 9 matchup. The injury report, it's always long. We'll take a look at where things stand heading into this game on Sunday against New Orleans. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Speaking of bets, looking at the Panthers-Saints game, the Panthers are now only 7-point underdogs at home, plus 265 money line. Over under is set at 43.5. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more of FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Taking a look at the injury report heading into the Week 9 matchup against New Orleans. Dave Canales will speak later on this afternoon as he'll give official game statuses for players. And looking at the offensive line, who's going to start at left tackle? Ike Ekwonu had an ankle injury they suffered last week, did come back into the game and finish it out, but has not practiced on Wednesday or on Thursday. Not sure whether he practiced today on Friday. Josh Nijman, though, who did not play last week as he was inactive, had a knee injury. He's been a full participant on Wednesday and Thursday. So if Icky cannot go, it looks like it'll be Josh Nijman. Good thing is Taylor Moton is back, and talked about this back in the summer when they signed Josh Nijman last year. The Panthers were not in a position where they could have benched Ike Ekwonu for his poor play. They were not in a position where they could have replaced Ike or Taylor had they gone down with an injury. They have that now with Josh Nijman. That's why the offensive line is better talent-wise overall. Top 5, even with Austin Corbett out, they're better overall because they have depth. They have Brady Christian who can step in. They got Chandler Zavala who can step in. They got Josh Nijman who can step in. All three have played fairly well for Carolina as they had to step in. So having 8 offensive linemen heading into the season that we've now seen you can depend on, that's a great spot. Now they only are down to 7 as Austin Corbett's out for the rest of the season. So curious to see how this works out, whether Ike's able to play and whether it will be Josh Nijman instead. So looking at left tackle, that's one of the areas. Adam Thielen, he was limited throughout the week last week, but did not practice on Friday as he ended up not being able to return off of IR with that hamstring injury suffered on that touchdown catch, which was one of the best throws of the season we saw probably. Now, I think the Coker throw last week, the throw to Coker by Bryce, maybe the best throw. Either way, one of the better plays we've seen by the Panthers all year long in a season lacking great plays, especially on offense. In the passing game, Adam Thielen had that hamstring, has not been able to play. He's been limited the last 2 days on Wednesday and on Thursday. We'll find out what his game status is. The Panthers have to activate him off of IR in order for him to play. So we'll see. He still has time with that window to be able to come back. Maybe he comes back next week in Munich. Maybe it's this week. We'll see there. And concerning, though, too, is Xavier Leggett. He popped up on the injury report on Thursday as a limited participant with a toe injury. And if somehow those two are not able to go, the rest of the Panthers receivers look like this: Jalen Coker, Jonathan Mingo, David Moore on the active roster. Then going to the practice squad, you got Devin Tompkins, who sounds like someone who's probably going to get called up anyways as far as just a standard elevation, but maybe even signed to the active roster now that Deontay Johnson is gone. We'll find more about that probably on Saturday. It's typically when the Panthers make those kind of transactions, when they sign guys to the active roster and then do the standard elevations. Dax Milne also is on the roster. Dan Chisena, and then their Pathways program player, Praise Alatoke. Those are the other guys who are options. So Moore, Mingo, Coker, Devin Tompkins, those 4 I would think for sure are getting a uniform for Sunday. Hope is Leggett's going to be fine. That would be the 5, and would love to see Adam Thielen. If they can have Adam Thielen, Jalen Coker, and Xavier Leggett ready to go on Sunday, like that is a receiving core you want to see the rest of the year here in Carolina. Possibly they could trade Adam Thielen. Was listening to Ryan Russillo's podcast. He had Albert Breer from SI up there, and he was talking about that's still a possibility. I think the Panthers at this point in time probably want to just stick around sticking out with Adam Thielen the rest of the year. We'll see how that works out, though. And then who's going to start at safety? Looking at that as well, as Jordan Fuller's missed the last 5 games. Also a hamstring injury, suffered in that win on the road against Las Vegas. Limited all last week, been a full participant all this week on Wednesday and Thursday, which would point to him being activated off of IR and being able to start on Sunday. As Panthers, they lost Nick Scott. He's now on IR with, I believe, a hamstring injury as well, who doesn't have a hamstring this year in Carolina. So it would be Fuller, and then it would be Xavier Woods starting. Devontae Richardson got the first career start last week in Denver. We'll see what his role is. Jamie Robinson, he has a knee injury. He's been a DNP throughout the week, did not play last week with that same knee injury. So Devontae Richardson would be up again as a backup. And we'll see. They ran a lot of 3 safety packages at points in time so far this season when they had the top 3 in Fuller, in Scott, and in Woods. Would like to see Devontae Richardson mixed in there, as he is the only of these safeties other than Jamie Robinson who's under contract next year, as he was a UDFA out of A&M. Would like to see him getting more of those opportunities and possibly step into that role for the future, as the Panthers have a lot to get figured out defensively following this season. And the last thing we're looking at injury report-wise, which of the rookies will make his debut this Sunday? Jonathan Brooks, with the knee injury coming back for the ACL, he has been a full participant all this week. He could make his debut next week. They got to at least activate him by the middle of next week in Munich. And they could do it next week, or they could go ahead and let him play this week. And I question whether Miles Sanders sticks around, as he is not going to have a role when Jonathan Brooks comes back. There wouldn't make much sense for him to have a role in the situation, as Panthers, kind of like Bryce Young, should be focused on those younger guys and getting them opportunities and really building towards the future in a lost season, which this season unfortunately has become yet again. But Brooks, maybe he makes his debut. Canales was asked about earlier in the week. Said we've got to see, got to let him go through it all, and whether he's up to football speed, that confidence in that knee, and then they'll make a decision. They could continue to slow play it. They could activate him, have him be inactive, because eventually, because they don't have to activate him this week. They got to activate him next week, and that does not mean he has to play. They could still slow play it, still wait, give him more time to practice, get his win back, and then throw him out there, maybe against the Chiefs in the final 5 games of the season. We'll see what they decide to do, but they can make this decision now to play him if they would like to. And that's one of the reasons why you would be interested in watching the game, is seeing whether Jonathan Brooks actually is going to play. And then Jaden Crumedy also has an ankle that has kept him out throughout the season. He's been a full participant all throughout the week. Another guy looking at him possibly making his debut as a Carolina Panther. So 2 guys you drafted who have not been able to play for you may make their debuts on Sunday, and that's something to look at. Look in the future, man. That's the rest of the year. If Bryce continues to play, hoping he develops and can turn into the guy. Looking at guys like Jonathan Brooks, Xavier Leggett, Jalen Coker, Jaden Crumedy, Devontae Richardson, Trevin Wallace, the young guys. That's the focus, development the rest of the year. Just trying to have some hope, find some guiding light in this dark season that we're having here in Carolina. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter, at Julian Council, where on Wednesdays throughout the regular season, I'm right here answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me to get those questions into me right now, or really following the game. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. Got to work NASCAR on Sunday, unfortunately, which means I'm going to have the podcast out later on Sunday than I would like to. Going to be a hellish couple of hours as I got to get ready to pack to go to Munich on Monday. So tune in live on YouTube. Get that show out there for you on Sunday. But in the meantime, take care.